Oh, I like it.
Yeah, rock,
We have
paper, scissors.
2 guests enter, 1 guest leave.
What's your go-to when you rock, paper, scissors? Do you go rock immediately or do you go scissors or paper?
There's a whole movie based on this that I can't remember the name of it. I'm not even kidding. And
Rochambeau.
yeah, but no, it's like a sci-fi movie. It's really weird. But there's like a science to how you're supposed to guess rock, paper, scissors.
I would think if
Backpack Show. So it dawns on me.
I would think you could guess based on the person's actions. Is what
I'm a paper guy. I got to tell you, I'm a paper guy.
I know. So now you'll lose every time because I'll know that.
You'll think, yeah.
And you'll go, says hello. Chloe says happy Monday. Chloe, come on.
It's not happy. Who the hell is happy on a Monday? Nobody.
Your mom.
My mom is happy on a Monday. My mom's happy all the time.
What day even is it? Yes, it's Monday.
Monday, I guess. That's what they're telling me.
They're all the same.
We
get to talk to Abraham Lincoln today.
Abraham Lincoln. We have a professional cyclist who can also talk about autoimmune diseases.
Hello, Josephine.
And is a Mainer, now probably living in Massachusetts or something. But, we all have to slide down. It goes down. That's who I'm bringing on first is Ellen Noble. Yeah, look at everybody. Josephine's here. That's Carol's friend. So nice. She said she was going to swing by. She liked my book, The Impact Equation.
I did too, actually.
Oh, thank you.
I wanted to use it in one of the classes I was teaching. And then how publishers are like all fussy about who they will do ebooks for and yada, yada. So I didn't get to use it. I was super mad about it. So I had to choose one of your other books. One of your other 8 books.
Superheroes in the Basement. That's the one I would have picked. My incredible book of poetry about nerdy stuff.
I did not go with that one.
Yeah.
But, I'll take it under advisement.
So my first bicycle was a 1976 era Huffy Thunder Road. It had the number 56 on the front of it. It was my first new bicycle. I'd had a hand-me-down before. And I proceeded to break it within the first few days of owning it. It's a story for another time. Not really, Michelle. Like, let's not get weird about it. But then my bike got stolen not too long afterwards because, you're 6 years old. You put your bike somewhere that it gets stolen.
In Maine? It got stolen in Maine?
You know who steal? Well, we were in the not so best part of town at that time in our lives, kind of lower class, middle, lower class, heading to upper, Carol and her 2 friends. So I'm going to think that Ellen Noble probably does a little bit to keep bikes from being stolen these days. You're a Trek rider now? Do you ride Trek? Is that your family?
I do. Yeah. I've been a Trek athlete for several years. I think this is my third straight season with Trek. Hello.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi.
My first expensive Trek was a $500 Gary Fisher that made me feel super like bourgeois because I'd never had a bike that cost more than $100.
Yeah. I rode Gary Fisher for a long time before I went to Trek. So they're a good, it's Kristen.
There.
Yeah, they're a great brand. I liked their partnership with Gary Fisher was really exciting for me.
Right.
I had a Fuji sandblaster. I was on Cape Cod and we had the rail trail and stuff, but it was there was always sand like somewhere on it. So it was like fat tires and stuff. Yeah. And I was never fast. So I was always like the one at the very back. That was
don't need to be.
Yeah. I would keep going, but I was never going to win.
How do you know which kind of biking you're going to pick? Like, if at first everybody's just like, whatever. But for instance, when I decided I was going to start running, I figured trail running because I'm big and fat. So it would be nice for my body and I could go slow and no one would care. It was about distance. What makes you pick the kind of riding you want to do?
It's exactly what you just said, honestly, without the need for self-deprecating comments if you don't want them. But it's really whatever you're inclined to. Like if you want to be off-road, if you want to be on the trail, you can get bikes that will take you off-road. If you want to be on-road, you can get an on-road bike. And then if you really don't know, there are hybrid style bikes that, are kind of that, depending on what you want, they can be the jack of all trades, master of none sort of bike. So it really just depends on what you're interested in and what you feel comfortable with and kind of finding a bike that meets your needs. And it is possible to have something that kind of does what you want, whether it's being comfortable in the sand on the rail trail or being able to go fast and far and all that with your friends. There are a lot.
Or just go. Chip says he always wanted a mongoose when he was a kid, but had a hard time with his Schwinn, so it wouldn't have made a lot of sense. for him.
Yeah.
But you were a 4-time cyclocross national champion. So to go from, I mean, I'm like a kid with a bike for sandy roads. You know, how do you go from kind of liking bikes to becoming a champion?
Yeah, I think that's something that's so interesting. Everyone has their own story in the sport of how they made that transition. It's not super like applicable, but I just grew up racing because both of my parents raced. So it was something that I had always kind of done even before I really cared for riding bikes. I really loved racing bikes because I've always been really, really competitive. So for me, it actually was, I started liking bikes a lot later in life. I started liking riding bikes a lot later in life than most, but I've been racing since I was a little kid. So I think my story doesn't really apply to a lot of people that just like.
I don't know. My parents were also very slow on bikes. I feel like there's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
You acquire your parents.
Right? My father was a master slow biker. So.
Yeah, exactly.
What's, you know, the world's changed so much, but it seems like your sport would be the kind of sport where you could get back out to it. Is it alive and thriving right now? What's the story with you know, the season?
Yeah, it's pretty complicated. We've been really lucky because kind of the nature of what we do and how we train gets us up and away from a lot of the cluster and hustle and bustle of mask wearing and 6 feet distance. So we're able to ride outside and train, which has been a huge blessing because there was a time where everyone was scrambling to get like trainers and stuff to be able to ride indoors because we thought that we would be on full lockdown like Italy or Spain.
Sure.
But we're really lucky to be able to train outside. But as for competitions, they start the delayed Tour de France in like 2 weeks. And I think that a lot of our competition is going to be based on the success or lack thereof of the tour. Because, you know, if there's a big spike after that, or if it's really hard to implement, I don't think that we'll race this season.
You, as a champion cyclist, having encountered a chronic illness before you realized that there was an illness, what was that experience like where your body's capable of doing these amazing things and then suddenly, you know, you're not winning, you're not placing the way you would like to?
Yeah, it was really hard. I think I've, you know, I've thought about this a lot, and I think that there's something that a lot of people can relate to regardless of what you're going through or, you know, what your situation ends up being. It's really hard to feel like you're feeling something that no one can see. And a lot of people, I think, really just believe that you're kind of, maybe that you're crazy or depressed. And I think it's really, really easy, especially with women in medicine, to jump to the idea that, you know, it's psychosomatic. So for me to like really feel, you know, like committed to finding that there had to be something. Like, I know my body. I've been in my body for 24 years and I've been a professional athlete for a really long time. Like, I know when something isn't right and it's not just mental. And so I was really just devoted to finding that answer. And it was just such a big relief when I was able to kind of eliminate that doubt that, wait, what if it is just all in my head? So yeah, it's a really hard process, but I think a lot of people can relate to that.
But in a competitive sport, so now you're dealing with not just the illness itself, but with people's perception of what it means and how sponsorable you are and all kinds of things. It must be an incredible amount of pressure.
It is. Yeah, it was really hard for me because being a professional athlete, you're in the spotlight a lot, whether you want to be or not. And so you're kind of subjected to the scrutiny of other people. And you know, you get a lot of comments from people or messages asking why you're not racing well. And then you read stuff online about, well, I think maybe she's not racing well because she's put on a lot of weight, or I think that maybe she wants to retire and just hasn't done it yet. And maybe she's burnt out. And so it's really hard being in that spotlight. And then every week you're put to the test about whether or not you've gotten better. And that can be really hard because as I've learned this, I'm going into like year 2 of this process, and I've only been aware of my illness for about a year, less than a year, but the whole process of getting sick and going to the doctors and doing the tests, it's been about 2 years. And so it's like, you know, testing yourself every week to see if you've improved is not a great timeline to operate on.
No, oh my gosh.
It's crazy.
And everyone's saying, are you better yet? Are you better yet? Are you better yet?
Yes, because in this sport, you know, people will have injuries like, you know, bone breaks or sprains or tears that you can come back from really fast, because everyone in medicine and everyone in sport knows how to deal with a broken collarbone. Like, it's, you know, it's like a dime a dozen to have a broken collarbone on your team. So everyone knows how to deal with that, and people can come back relatively fast because it's so straightforward. And there's like a very clear thing that's broken, and then you can see the progress of how it heals, and it's pretty much linear. And so to deal with something that's invisible, that's internal, that predominantly affects women, all of these things make it harder and harder to be understood in a sport that is very male-centric and that operates very strictly on like data and numbers and hard information. So
I didn't even realize it was male centric. So hearing you say that now, I'm seeing a whole nother side of this.
Yeah.
Well, and it doubles down on, I'm still way back. You know, you ever have like something, you hear something, you don't want to interrupt, you're just sitting there and you're thinking about, but you've lost input after that. You're just like smiling politely because you're thinking. You made the point about the fact that women dealing with medical issues face so much more insurmountable challenges because it's all in your head. It's all in your head. It's all in your head. I never like to ask professional athletes, did you watch that show questions, because you don't do anything like that. You're just always outdoors, always riding 80 miles.
No, we do. That's almost all we do.
Did you watch the documentary, The Bleeding Edge, which is a whole thing about, you know, women being, you know, mistreated and whatnot, and like three different medical advice things that mostly centered on women. It was interesting, just because insofar as like what you summed up, it just keeps happening more and more and more. So for you, not just to speak out about dealing with your illness, but dealing with that perception that the medical world felt against you in some ways. That's important. Do you find yourself advocating, or does that just seem to slide out into your stories more? I'm asking, like, how do you bring that, because of your platform, to more people?
Yeah, it's so funny that you should ask that. And I think it's super relevant to what you were just talking about with the documentary. So just yesterday, I finished a book that was like vital for me to really like double down on getting answers about my health. I always, for some reason, mess up the name, but I think it's The Lady's Handbook for Her Mysterious Illness. And it's this one woman's story about how she battled with mysterious illness for like 10 or more years and was just totally mistreated by the medical system because she had a multitude of invisible illness. And, you know, like, so she just talks about that a lot. And then at the end, she talks about like, if you are someone who is mysteriously ill, here's how you should get involved. And for me, I finally finished this book just yesterday, and it really got me to thinking about the impact that I would like to have and the fact that I'm so fortunate to have such a big platform. Yes, this is it. It's amazing. It's quite long actually, but it's a really, really good book for anyone who has any level of undiagnosed illness, I guess. If you have any, or if you're just interested in the topic, it's a really, really well written book. But yeah, for me, I was really starting to think yesterday about the impact that I want to have. And if nothing else, I think just speaking more candidly about my experience and what I went through, but also just what I'm going through now, because it's not over. I think that it helps a lot of people, because I think that if I had a person that I was reading about a lot that was still investigating all these sort of mysteries in health, I think I would have gone down this path a little bit sooner.
With the added pressure of people saying, you better yet? Are you better yet? Chloe, who's watching, says she has hypothyroidism and can't imagine what it would be like trying to do an athletic sport, especially during flare-ups.
Yeah.
And Carol says, don't be jealous, Michelle. She has other friends. All right, Carol. Carol's so popular. Don't be upset at her.
Oh, the comment section.
The comment section is one of the best parts.
So I sort of half-asked the question about getting back to the season, and then I'm curious to know, so it's basically watch and wait on the Tour de France. So what is it? When's your season normally? What does that mean for you? Does that mean just go out and keep up? You know, like when you train for racing, there's kind of day to day, but then there's real like tapers that you're supposed to be thinking about. How is that affecting your training?
Yeah, it's definitely complicated. So for me, I race two disciplines. So I race mountain bikes and cyclocross, and with a bit more of a focus on cyclocross than mountain. So my cyclocross season is from September to February. And then the mountain bike season is from like February to September, but I don't race the full mountain bike season. I usually race maybe June through August for mountain. So cyclocross should be starting in the next couple of weeks. This is normally when we get, you know, we get all of our equipment dialed and we start doing those final efforts. But for me this year, I've been really fortunate because I was at such a deficit last year, having taken so much time off, that I'm actually able to train and kind of catch back up to where everyone else is. So I've felt so lucky to be able to have so much uninterrupted time to train and get back. So right now we're just doing big, long rides, and then we'll have an idea. We'll have at least a month or 6 weeks notice before we start racing again. And that's when we're going to do some pretty high intensity and then take a little bit of time off. But we only need a week to really like taper. And then you don't want to be too rested going into an event. I mean, it's personal preference, but if you're too rested going into an event, then your legs will actually feel kind of heavy. Like you haven't done anything in a long time. So we don't need quite as much rest, I think, as you'd expect if you've been periodically resting. So if I've
been tapering since March, so
you're so ready. You just need like 1 week of intensity and you're going to be ready.
So ready. Michelle says her daughter had a concussion last year and she's a competitive soccer player. And so she had symptoms months after she was supposed to be healed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the quotes on supposed to are really, really important because everyone's body is so different. And even with how much research has been made on concussions recently, we still know so little about them. Even right now, I'm kind of recovering from a very minor concussion earlier in the week. And I thought like I was expecting to have been better by now. And I'm going into a week of not really doing much of anything. And it's been really frustrating, but it's just meeting yourself where you are with your own body. It's so challenging.
That's the thing. So it's a chronic illness and not something that you're really ever like completely done with. And everything you do in your life apart from cycling affects it, right? Like your diet and other things like that. So you have to pay kind of constant attention.
Well, I think I see Ellen Noble's next role in helping people meet themselves where they are. I see, you know, right beyond your racing career, the things you're going to do to inspire a lot of other people. Really glad you came by and talked with us today on that. If you don't mind, we're going to put you in a holding pattern.
Yes.
You could pedal backwards because we're booting you backstage. But stick around if you can, and if you can't, we'll, you know, people know how to find you. We already do that all the time. There you go. But I think it was a long time ago, wasn't it?
It's 77 years ago.
Might have been that we get the chance to ask Michael Krebs on it. By the way, this is Carrie's week. She planned, I think, every guest but one this week.
So I was really excited. I'll tell you what intrigued me about Michael is I thought, here's this really talented actor. And if you look at his IMDB, he's been playing Abraham Lincoln since like 1994. So I had two thoughts. One was he's got to be damn good at it now. And the other was, I wonder what his experience was before that. Like, did he like Lincoln first and then get, you know, offered the role, or did he take the role and then get super into it? Like I just had questions.
SpongeBob.
I had questions.
That's what he did before.
And everybody really, really loved what Ellen had to say. I just wanted to tell her that before we move on. Meet yourself where you are with your own body. That's a long hashtag, Kate.
That's a big hashtag, Kate.
Yeah, don't use that.
All right, let's bring in Michael Krebs, our actor friend.
Oh, look at the hat. I love it.
Aging by the minute.
Okay, so which was it? Take the role as Abe Lincoln first and then get really into it, or the other way around? Super love Lincoln, look for the role.
Being hooked as an actor from a teenager, getting the lead in the junior class play, getting into the senior class play, going through arts in college. What's it going to like, you know, in the 70s? I think I can be a professional actor. Everything's open. The sky is wide open. So I was really just coming out of repertory work and being lucky enough to work at a professional theater for 10 years that led me to do this.
Well, as Kate says, and as my shirt says, do more of what makes you happy. Thanks. I didn't think you could read that, Kate, so thank you for that. But so what's it been like to inhabit the role of Abraham Lincoln for so long?
You know, sometimes I think I've been so lucky that I'm almost like a truth serum. people come up, all walks of life, all ethnicities, and talk to me about how they admire Abraham Lincoln and what's the thing they admire about Abraham Lincoln. And a bit of their life unfolds to me. And I wonder sometimes if they really discuss it with anybody else. And I just feel like it's just been a key to open so many doors, because everybody has something that they relate to with Abraham Lincoln. Whether you lost a parent, whether you lost a sibling, depression, or so many other things that brings you into Lincoln's realm. And it seems like each one of those things I just talked about, people, that's a gateway for them to get into Lincoln. And then once that door is open, this great admiration begins about this man and his life. So
one thought I was having about this, Michael, is that we're at an interesting inflection point for contemplating U.S. presidents. We're the first time I ever really thought anything about a U.S. president, by the way, you know, to your point about you being there and the difference of live, this was not live. I was at Disney and I was at that sort of animatronic Hall of the Presidents. Yeah. You know, and
I was there before I started doing Lincoln too. Yes.
There you go.
That's like no one's favorite attraction at Disney, by the way.
I know. And I had no intention of liking it. But like my parents took me there. I was like early teens and like maybe just 13. And I remember thinking, like in this, you know, those weird dumb realizations you have in life where everybody already knows this, but you don't really know it for a minute. I was like, these people were alive, like really alive, like, you know, the reality of it. So there is something to seeing it. But this very long preamble that I'm giving is the office of the presidency right now is at a very different place than it ever was ever. And without even thinking about that, it must be interesting to sort of explain at once the gravitas of somebody like Abe Lincoln, but also the mirth and the rounded full bodiness of a character like that compared to just being the stuffed hat.
And his good looks.
And his good looks.
Yeah, it is, because, I mean, there's so many avenues of Lincoln that you can study. You can do the pre-presidency. You can just study his presidency. You can study his youth. And it's been fascinating to me that people really do like to go down those certain paths. I'm more interested in his youth, his state legislature days than I am. And that's, I think, the fascinating part is once you learn how Lincoln and his party worked to get things done in Illinois, you realize how much compromise goes into something. The big thing in Illinois was moving the state capital from Vandalia, Illinois, to Springfield, Illinois. Well, Lincoln was a member of a group of men called the Long Nine. They were all over 6 foot. They all wore those stovepipe hats. That's where it all comes from.
Chris, you just need a hat.
They decided, we are going to, as a group, move this state capital to Springfield. It's just a better center location for the state and everything else. And they got the job done. So a lot of people like to study just the Long Nine and what they got done. You could write 10 books about the Long Nine.
That's really micro, though. That's like a niche, Michael.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think was
in Lincoln to play? I even know a Lincoln presenter that does a beardless Lincoln, and he makes a living off it, you know?
Wow. But do people not recognize him, though, without the beard? I would hate to have to open every performance with, this is Abe Lincoln without the beard.
Oh, he was a genuine threat to me 20 years ago when I met him. I went, holy cow. I even pointed it out to Deb, my actress. This guy's got it. He doesn't have a beard, and look, he's just a spitting image. But the other thing I noticed is his wife was pushing a double stroller. And I knew that his life was going to be somewhat limited in what he could do in portraying Lincoln.
You're kind of vicious, Michael. Get that competitive edge.
Well,
like he's got twins, I can take him.
And you know, that was it. In choosing my actors, you know, I think we talked about this a little earlier. My first actress had 3 kids, and touring the U.S. was going to be a problem. So it was important to me to find an actress at the time that had no children and was willing to tour, and that she was a professional actress as well. So I was lucky enough to find Deb Miller 22 years ago. And we've been working together ever since.
But not an item. not an item. She's just your actress.
Yes.
She's your on-screen spouse. So she's like a work spouse. That's what I was saying.
Mhm.
And she's branched off to do so many other characters as well. She does. She's actually president of the Jane Austen Society of the Midwest. So,
oh wow,
she's more in depth to dealing with this time than I am, because she's doing more and more library presentations, and I've kind of backed off. I mean, really, there hasn't been a great calling yet for it, but she's more savvy at it than I am.
Kate wants to know what your favorite years of Lincoln's life are as far as his leadership skills are concerned.
By the way, Chris Brogan in a Lincoln hat.
You just couldn't let it go.
Well, you said you got to get a hat. You could do it because you're over
you
6
could be in that group that moved the capital of Illinois from one city to another.
Well, Chris, I want to tour with you. Jeff Bridges doing The Big Lebowski. You're pretty close.
Well, that's
I'm
just
sure
like
you've heard it.
Your opinion, man.
I don't get a celebrity doppelganger. Come on, Michael.
All right, look, I have to break into a story before you ask your question because Michael will appreciate this. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm at dinner with some friends, and we're getting into the car, and it's one of those big, like, it looks like the Secret Service took me out to dinner. So, but as sometimes happens, by the way, I have very long hair, but I cut it all off at the very beginning of coronavirus. So this is appropriate to Jeff Bridges. This guy comes running up to the car and body slams my window kind of by mistake, drunkenly. He goes, "Oh my God, it's the dude. I love you, dude." And I'm like, "I love you, man." And then it left him up. I have no Jeff Bridges impression.
That kind of thing happens to you, though, when it's not a mistake. So I don't know. People just
what
love you.
I love is at 5:30 in the morning, walking through Midway Terminal or O'Hare Terminal, and somebody yells full voice, "Abe Lincoln! Oh my God!" You haven't even had your first cup of coffee yet. All you want to do is just get to the gate. Just get to the
Thank
gate.
God you're here.
Yeah, you're back. Fix it quick.
That's a funny story. I remember once I had to get out of LaGuardia. There's a big storm coming, and I had the chance to maybe get standby for an earlier flight. So I go up to the ticket counter and ask for the standby, and they're all snickering at each other, smiling, pretending not to look at me. So I realize I'm on standby. I'm 23 on the list, I think. So I go to Dunkin' Donuts in LaGuardia, and if you were ever in LaGuardia in the old days, you know what kind of fun it is to be in LaGuardia. Just about to chomp on a chocolate donut with a cup of coffee, and I hear it. "Abraham Lincoln, report to gate 26. Abraham Lincoln to gate 26. I look around me and everybody's staring at me at my little counter I'm eating my donut at. And as I make my way down that long ramp at LaGuardia, there I see all the heads looking around the corner to see Abe Lincoln coming down the hallway. I actually had preferential treatment. I think I was boarding class C and I got on an A, so it can help sometimes.
You got your donut in your mouth. I'm on my lunch break, lady.
Well, it was really funny you started that story. And by the way, I love how we had to reference now the old LaGuardia because supposedly there's a new one.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but
no,
I don't think many of us will see it for a while.
But I was thinking about the fact that in Disney World, the universe of Disney, that you're cast, like you have to be on stage at all times. And if you're outside the doors of whatever, you're whoever you are at that moment the whole time. And that has to be a little difficult for you because you can't quite shake off the semblance without just a little bit of work.
Yeah, I think when I first started doing it, I kind of resented it a little bit because as an actor for 10 years, once you left stage, you were who you were again. Everybody accepted you that way. But I realized there was going to be no off switch initially. And I'd go to parties with friends, and it would, not everybody in the party was friends, but I wasn't being looked at as who I was anymore. I was just being Abe Lincoln all the time. And It started to grate on me a little bit. But as time went by, I saw it as kind of a blessing because I don't like to be noticed. I don't like to stand out in a crowd, but I can't think of any other character I could represent where you get such great feelings from people.
Yeah, he's so beloved. There's worse things.
Something that affected a affected them in their lives. Even though
need to get that, President.
No, it's an 888 number. That's what you avoid. Right?
Kate wants to know, what is the hardest part of Lincoln's character for you to portray?
His voice, and to satisfy the historians in the audience that expect a different voice. But I decided early on in doing this, you know, Lincoln was described in many books as having a high, squeaky voice. And
I never knew that.
Me neither.
What am
like
I going to
Tyson?
Am I going to go out and do a 30? And there's no voice recording of Lincoln, so everything is interpretive. You know, you're not an impersonator; you're an interpreter of what you're doing. So, are you going to interpret what history is written about him? And as my research went on, I found out he only had this voice when he was speaking to a large crowd. And he found out a falsetto would carry further in the audience than if he were to use a regular voice. So Lincoln learned how to pitch his voice up a little bit to be better heard. But you never heard that criticism of him or that description of him in his presidency when he would talk to Congress or others. So I had to make a decision. Am I going to satisfy the historians with a high, squeaky, irritating voice and speak for 30 minutes and let all those words just fall into the gutter? Or am I going to use a more natural voice and let those words do the work? And it really just, these words are just too important. They're just too brilliantly put down to try to affect with a voice interpretation. So
I think Deb is all of us right now, Michael. We want to hear the Lincoln voice.
Well, good morning. You know, I mean, you start out with the colloquialism of what your area is. He's born in Kentucky, but I think he's more influenced by the colloquialism of Illinois than probably the 9 years he had in Kentucky before he moved to Indiana. So really, you have to think of of Lincoln's voice as kind of moving from area to area and being influenced by the great storytellers. And everything Lincoln was influenced by in his early life was storytelling and the ability to tell a great story. So I think those stories are more important than trying to affect a voice that people are going to go, well, you know, I was listening to what you're saying, but boy, you kind of got squeaky and kind of tuned out. And
right. You get distracted by it.
Criticisms.
Like Bob Collins got distracted wondering if that was the Partridge Family opening riff on your phone. Michael.
That's actually Lindsey Buckingham's guitar solo album.
Get out. Nice. Do you have something that you always want to perform as Lincoln? Like when you perform at schools or when you do any of these performances where you get a little bit of leeway versus something that they kind of always ask for, something that you want to do?
I was lucky in '96 to be working at Chicago History Museum during the largest Lincoln exhibit ever put together. We had the Huntington Collection, the Illinois Preservation League. So all these things came together in Chicago to be the largest Lincoln exhibit ever. And they hired me to do the President Lincoln. They hired another Lincoln to do Lincoln Douglas debates and other Frederick Douglass, other historical characters in Lincoln's time. And I was lucky enough back then to have a speech constructed for me, written by Gene Walsh. That's called something I've done for 25 years now, Lincoln's re-election speech. And the brilliance of what Gene did is he took a lot of Lincoln's election speeches and letters and kind of made a hodgepodge speech. But even though they might be taken out of context and it's salt and peppered with great Lincoln quotes, but also has a large amount of words that you would never have heard from Lincoln before. And that's a 30-minute speech. And what I've always been surprised at when I roll this speech out, there's such great writing in this that I go to groups and I'll hear a reenactor in back of me, get ready for the Gettysburg Address. Here we go again, you know. And to roll out this speech and to impress people with it. And I realize it's not so much my performance, it's these words that are really rolling across that they're getting the meaning of. That's been my greatest weapon as a solo Lincoln. But I think our show that was written by a good friend of mine, Jim Clark, the duet I do with my actress, was probably my favorite piece because there's so much humor in it. We based it on the Bickersons. Now, I don't know, maybe Chris, you remember this old radio show? Did your parents ever listen to it or talk about it?
I used to live across the hall from the Bickersons.
Because of my years of professional theater, our artistic director based this Christmas show about Santa on the roof. He based it on the Bickersons. And I just thought these recordings were incredible of this married couple that had been together for years, and the back and forth and the humor out of it. And that's what I wanted my Lincoln show to be. I knew how Mary had a relationship with Lincoln, and I wanted this writer to come up with the humor of this relationship. And if you win them over with humor, you can move them into more serious areas. They're going to follow you. I found if you start out too serious, then you're putting a weight on the whole performance, and it's got to stay there. It's hard to break from weight into humor. And it's the greatest problem I had with doing solo. With the solo show we developed, I couldn't make those leaps. You know, you're asking me to be humorous in one moment, beyond melancholy in a couple of minutes later, and just too hard of a bridge to make. But with a couple of characters,
like when Casey Kasem did the long distance dedications.
Yeah.
I'd go right into a peppy song.
That's segue, you know.
This is for a puppy named Cuddles who got hit by a car. And then you're on to like the next big song.
Listen, just to keep going on that, and then I'll die. Birthday boy Scott Woodard, Coach Scott Woodard asked the question, do you play other characters? And if so, does your Lincoln ever creep in? Like, you know, if you're playing SpongeBob, does Lincoln still overwrite that? Or?
You know, I haven't had the opportunity to do anything else than Lincoln for 20 years. I thought about returning to stage a couple of times, but the Lincoln work just kept piling up. So I just didn't even approach it. And I joined Actors Equity Association, which I think was probably the most useless of all unions in the acting profession, because there's just so many things about it. There's just, the pension was terrible. You lost your insurance the minute you walked out the door, and just so many things about it that were just not worthy of continuing. So I just dropped my actors. I suppose if I were to go back to an Actors Equity Association performance again, I don't know. I'm a member of SAG now, so I don't know. I'd probably have to pay dues 25 years in arrears to go back on stage or something.
Oh, dear Lord.
Kate's asking, what's something you found out about Lincoln that most of us wouldn't know?
Death.
Is that a thing?
How much death surrounded him. When he went to give the Gettysburg Address, he was suffering from a mild varioloid, which we think of today as smallpox. The black valet that accompanied Lincoln to Gettysburg died 2 weeks later, suffering from the same ailment. When Lincoln was in Gettysburg, to think he left his sick son behind, Tad, having just lost another son 2 years earlier, how death just surrounded him wherever he went. And I think you really have to do your research on Lincoln to really realize that. You know, people say humor, a lot of seriousness in Lincoln, but to keep an upper brow, to talk positively when death is always knocking on your door, is a unique.
And to have so much compassion for other people in the midst of your own struggles. I think that's very timely right now, because everyone's in the midst of a whole bunch of struggles, and it's hard sometimes to find that compassion for others.
Yeah, you know, and it makes me think of my favorite Lincoln joke, which is, and besides that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like the play?
Yeah.
Too soon. It's too soon.
My favorite,
Chris.
Douglas called him two-faced, and Lincoln goes, I put it to you, if I had two faces, would I be wearing this one?
You know, by the way, I'm bringing Ellen back in. That is my, I'm going to speak up on behalf of my mom, who said something slightly different but similar. You know, you're too good looking to play Lincoln. I don't know if you've caught on to that little detail, Michael.
You know, that's how I get a laugh in Q&A. You know, people will go on, you know, once I shave the mustache, do all the darkening and everything. I really don't wear any makeup, but that's how I try to advise, you know, what made you get interested in Lincoln? And now, well, of course, I'm far too handsome to play Lincoln. But, you know, that kind of dissipated over the years, though. What I used to hear all the time, you know, 25 years ago, well, I've had an old lady come up to me, you know, you're an awfully young Lincoln. And I just don't hear that anymore.
And you were like, wait, just wait. Ellen, who do you get? Who do people think you look like?
Famous people.
Yeah.
No
one ever.
I get sometimes I get people on Instagram be like, I just saw your doppelganger, and I'll see it and be like, I don't look anything like this, but I appreciate the thought.
I sometimes get Claire Danes. People would say Claire Danes, but I never get anybody like
a little Helen Hunt going.
I don't get anybody known for being hot though. Like that would be nice.
That's how I feel. I used to get this one girl who I was like, oh wow, okay, that's
thanks. Great. Good Lord. We had one comment. They wanted to know what cameras we're using. I have a Logitech HD.
Yeah, Rabbi, I've got a Logitech as well, so I don't know what everybody else is using. I'm presuming Michael's got something a little better than the laptop lid, but I don't know.
Professional. Oh, and Bob Collins says that you look like
Gillian Anderson.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but Ellen's a little young for that. You'll have to go check it out on Netflix or something. X-Files.
I know that from my best friend who's quite a bit older, but I've never seen. It's the X-Files, right?
Oh, it's a great series to go back and look
for a
at.
while. Yeah, I punched out of it though. After it got really complicated.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's one of those it's one of those sci-fi series that almost like the way comic books get, which you also don't read. You know, they start off pure and simple, and then they get just like overloaded by themselves. By the way, you know what? I'm going to throw something in because I'm still not used to doing it. We have a sponsor, and our sponsor is StreamYard. It's the actual application and technology we're using to make the show. If you want this awesome software for yourself to do whatever kind of live streaming you want to all the platforms I'm making up this copy as I go to all the platforms you want to go to, you can use this link, cbrogan.me/StreamYard. And every time you do, I get at least a cheeseburger worth of meal for it. So sponsorship.
I love that it's juicy tech. So Kate says you look like the woman from Wentworth. Her name escapes me.
Okay.
And Deb says quite a bit older. Ouch. Your friend that's quite a bit older.
Well,
I'm 24 and she's 30. So I feel like she's like 30.
That's not quite a bit older.
She's quite a bit older than me. 10 years.
Sure, settle down, Kate.
We're all done.
Yeah, that's it. So it strikes me that you're both like
close to Sean Connery in Red October at one point.
Oh yeah, Arabians.
You just do this all day. But it occurs to me that you're both very competitive, like different industries, but very competitive. Like Michael looks at the other actor with the double stroller with twins and is like, yes.
Yeah, I was listening behind the scenes, like
yeah, like Ellen, what's your double stroller with twins? Like when you see somebody and you're like, oh, hot dog, I'm beating that one today. What's the sign?
One thing that like pops into my mind is we do like course preview on the day of the event. So like for a lot of what we do, we never get, we don't really like pre-ride much before because the courses are relatively simplistic, but there's something really special about like cleaning a feature, like doing something like really smoothly while everyone else is standing at the bottom, like just pulling their hair out, trying to figure out how they're going to ride it. And then you watch people like completely lose their cool over this particular feature. And the truth is with what we do, nothing is ever super long. Like none of these features are ever very long. So it's like, if you can't do it, just figure out the way to like get through it. And it's not really going to matter that much. But you watch people just completely come unhinged over these things when you're like, if you can just keep a cool head. For me, that's something that I think is a little bit of like, you know, like a little bit of a bolstering for me when you can do something with ease and you see other people losing sleep over it.
So that's your double stroller with twins.
Maybe.
Deb says if 30 is much older, then she's ancient and at death's door.
That's not what I meant.
And I'm already dead, so it's amazing that I could
shuffled off this mortal coil. But Ellen, that makes me think when you think of competitive. So when I ran my trail marathon way back in 2004, before you were born, I was trailing up to it and trying to get to it. And there was this I was running a 5-mile beach run because trail is all off, you know, so you have to you can't do street. So I'm running this thing and I see this little old lady kind of a ways ahead of me. And I'm thinking, I'm going to catch up. So to me, the way my competitive is like, I'm going to magnet
old
to the
lady.
I'm going to magnet to
Mary's age, or like how old are we talking?
Yeah, like my age.
She could have been like 1,006. So
hold on, I need a yellow card for her, but I don't have one. So
yeah,
substituting.
You said it.
I know. So as I get up to her though, and all I'm thinking the whole time, she's very far off because the beach does this thing where you can see everything, and of course, you know, you just there she is, there she is, there she is, and like you want to think about something else, but you can't. When I finally got up to her, she looks over at me and goes, "Good for you, honey," and boosh, off she went. She finished like 2.5 days before I finished that 5-mile race. So that's. There you go for competitive. So
you know what, you got what you deserved. She saw that double stroller with twins coming up in the rear view and was like, she said, "I'm gonna have a little fun."
He's my double stroller.
Constant reference for you now, Carrie. The double stroller with
yeah,
twins.
that's it. I'm gonna be looking for it.
Well, you know, as a writer, we all listen for those parts. That's like, what's the hook that we're gonna steal forever? It's a double stroller. All right, listen, backpack question. There's some things we do on the show. One of them is ask a backpack question, which is the world is shifting. What do we do? What do we put in our backpack to get some success? You know, I have 5 things that I stuck in them. I can't even find that graphic. 5 things that I stuck in the backpacks. Oop, I did that. Story, collaboration, autonomy, manchu, which is a word that means one family in Okinawan, and execution. These are the 5 things I start the backpack with. What are you going to put in the backpack, Ellen Noble? What's something you can add?
I know that this one's already been said based on the pre-show notes, but I think vulnerability is really huge. But I think something else that I'll add that hopefully hasn't been done is you need to have a pretty strong why. I think right now it's especially relevant with kind of everything being put on hold. But I think for me, having the reason that you do it and the thing that's going to keep you going is vital, because it's easy to put in the work and to show up when everything's going well. But you need that reason to like get out of bed and kick ass every day, even when there's very little ass to kick. So that's probably my biggest thing that's kept me going through a lot, is having that why of why I do it.
Michael Krebs, what do you say? What goes in the backpack now?
Are these too obvious? Honesty, or if I can't use honesty, can I say truth? Does that?
I think
you can say whatever works for you.
Honesty. Oh, that's great.
Mr. President.
What am I going to go to?
You are wonderful people. So glad to have you on, Michael Krebs, Ellen Noble. What a gang today. Listen, I made a slight change to the way we end the show, which is really going to upset everybody. But listen, my mom says she really hates the way I end the show. And I think